Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Jonathan Corbin, CEO and co-founder of Maven AGI, a customer experience platform that's raised $28 million in funding. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm super excited for this conversation. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Talk to us about what you're building today.
We're building a Asiatic platform for customer experience. And so a little bit about me, I spent the last 4 years at HubSpot building the global CS organization. And we were responsible for 220,000 customers, millions of premium customers. And what we were trying to do is to make sure that they kept using our product and they kept using more of it. And so, we wanted to create these moments during their interactions where we were creating these like wow moments, right? Like if you are using HubSpot marketing module, that you're getting real value out of it. That's how you get value out of it. And so how do we create more of those opportunities for people? How do we help to better assist them? And so when you start to get into the mind of your user, you start to understand what are the challenges that you face. You went out, you purchase software to do a thing, and you have a limited amount of time to do that. So when you're in this process of using it and you can't figure out how to get to the point where you get leads out of this machine that you just bought, you want instant help. Not only do you want instant help, but you actually don't want to use that product at all. Your goal in purchasing it was, I need like 100 leads next month. And so as we kind of went through like the multi-step process of understanding what our users want and how we could help them to attain it, we said there is something amazing about the capabilities that large language models are able to unlock for the end users. And so we started building Maven AGI. We started back in July of last year. We raised a seed round from Lux E14. Sorry.
Like the gang in Guatemala?
Yeah, exactly. We have too many numbers in our investors. And so we raised an $8 million seed round from them. And we said, hey, there's a couple things we want to accomplish here. One, we want to build a great product. How do we know if we have a great product? Well, we have to help real people solve real problems. And so for us, we went out and we started having conversations with companies, large, small, across multiple verticals. We believe we're solving a horizontal challenge. And it turned out a lot of people wanted what we were selling. So we continued to build our product, prove out the cases. And in June of this year, we started sharing more with the world about what we were doing. We announced a case study with OpenAI where we were answering as much as 93% of customer inquiries with no humans involved, using AI agents that we had built and deployed across these very large and small organizations. So that's a little bit about Maven. That's what we're building. And I'm even more excited about what the future looks like.
I have so many questions that I want to ask you about Maven and everything that you're building, but I have to go back a little bit and ask you a few questions about HubSpot. So HubSpot is one of my favorite companies. I think they've just done such an incredible job with marketing, with category creation. They're just awesome. What I want to ask about though is the culture. So I don't know, probably 8 years ago, I read some book about a journalist who was hired into the organization, worked at HubSpot for a little bit, and then wrote this like brutal kind of takedown about the company. Do you know which book I'm talking about?
Yeah. Before I started, some of my friends said, hey, there's this book you have to read before you take this job. I read it going in there. I think it's completely unfair categorization. And maybe that was their experience. I'm not going to argue with that. But I think that the culture at HubSpot is something that I think there's very few people can emulate. You've probably read the culture code that Dharmesh put out very early on in like the HubSpot founding. The other aspect of it is the best way for you to understand culture at a place is to look at how long people are staying there. Go to Glassdoor, reviews are unbelievable. The other thing that I found when I was going through the interview process, I kept meeting these people. I've been here for 10 years. I've been here for 8 years. I've been here for 12 years. I was like, okay, like maybe the culture isn't that bad. And for each person, you would go to them and say, what's kept you here? And there was a massive camaraderie across the organization. Now, when I started, we were about 2,000 people. It grew to about 7,700 people by the time I left. But it was true even at 7,700 people. People genuinely cared about each other. And I think one of the things that was really powerful in keeping people kind of mission focused and keeping people there was the fact that each person genuinely believed that they were helping companies to grow better. And so that was the ethos that was embedded in every person you brought into the company. And as you continue through the company meetings, through everything, it's like, hey, we're doing this because it's going to help companies grow better. And so for me, I think it was like massive unlock in terms of my understanding of how you create a mission-driven organization.
Yeah, that book just felt very unfair when I read it. And like some of the stuff, it's like, I don't know, any company, if you go into it, if you're not a startup person, it's probably going to feel weird and it's probably going to look weird. I think startups aren't for everyone. But I remember going through that book, looking for like the smoking gun that made it so bad. And like it didn't really exist. It was just, a quirky culture. And that seemed to really be the gist of it.
I think like it's very hard to find startup cultures that aren't quirky,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, you think about like what are the odds of a startup working out? 10%, 10%, right? Like
Mhm.
that's kind of like the established norm. And so you're like, hey, I'm gonna go leave whatever corporate job that I have in order to do something that where it's like a 90% chance of failure. You have to be a little crazy in order to do that. And so expecting like, okay, the person's crazy enough to go leave a normal job and like do this thing where there's like a 90% chance of failure. I mean, yes, they're gonna be a little bit odd. So yeah, I think if your expectations are different, then you've probably been exposed to different people than I have.
On the topic, people being crazy and leaving their job, let's talk about you being crazy and leaving your job. What was it like to leave HubSpot and go out on this journey where, like you said, only 10% chance of success?
Yeah. So what was interesting for me is that first of all, it was an area that I'm very passionate in. So when I think about like, my own work history, when I joined HubSpot, Brian Halligan made the joke, we're probably the only category leader that you haven't worked. So I spent 5 years at Adobe. I was at Marketo. I was at Sprinkler. I spent a lot of time in the CX space.
Mhm.
The reason why I decided, hey, I'm going to go leave and go start a company is because this was a challenge that I had been kind of chasing for years. I remember going out on a West Coast tour when I was at a company called Sprinkler, and I met with Apple, and I met with Nike, and we were talking about like the customer experience they were delivering to their customers and why it was fundamentally broken. So I buy a bunch of shoes from Nike. I run, I go to the gym, I do a bunch of shit.
Mhm.
And so it's like, hey, why am I getting ads from Nike for like 2.5-year-old children's shoes? I've never bought children's shoes from them. I don't buy like, any of the stuff affiliated with that. You keep giving me ads for things that are not meaningful for me. You know where I live because you ship stuff to my house. You have my credit card number. You know the sports that I play. You know the gear that I buy. You know how frequently I buy stuff. Why can't I get a better experience here? Apple's another one, right? I bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of Apple stuff over my lifetime. Every time I walk into an Apple store, it's like, hey, have you ever seen an Apple phone before? And you're like, yes, I bought so many of them. Why can't you guys get your shit together? And so I think, it's like the thing is fundamentally broken, the way that we treat customers, we interact with them despite having all the information required in order to deliver a great experience. And so I felt very strongly about that then and felt even more strongly about that as the evolution of technology and our ability to change that. And so when I saw the opportunity in front of me, I was like, this is the future. You can spend the rest of your life focusing on trying to keep people in kind of an incumbent model where we're not delivering this great experience, or we can be on the cutting edge of creating and delivering that. So for me, it was an obvious choice. Now, when I went back and said, hey, I'm leaving and I'm going to go start a company, I think they were like, okay, you are definitely a little bit crazy. You should still stick around here. And so it required a little bit of convincing in order to help them understand that I was very serious about doing this. And the nice thing was is they were very supportive of my efforts in doing that. So kudos to them and the great organization over there.
So let's talk about this problem. Like, why is it so hard to solve? Like, if you look at an organization like Apple, it's like they're not a bunch of idiots running around, very, very smart people. Same with Nike, same with a lot of these companies that, in my consumer life, I have interactions. I'm like, this is such a dog shit experience. Like, why is that? Why is it so hard to get this right?
Let's talk about like maybe some personal experiences that we've all had. If you've ever bought like any SaaS software, right? I know that area very well, so I'm going to talk about it.
Mhm.
All right. I've decided that I am in the market for a solution that allows me to send emails. I'm going to go read like a bunch of information about that to find the one that I think is going to be the best fit for me. I'm probably going to interact with marketing material on their website, and then I'm going to fill out some form to talk to one of their sales reps. The information that I read and whatever like I was engaging with never makes its way to the sales rep. So I tell them all over again why I'm interested in their thing. They're going to go down this checklist of like, how do I qualify the buyer? Great. You're serious about buying it. Tell them all the use cases that I want to solve. And then they're going to be like, great, I'll take your credit. After they take my credit card, then they're going to like, hey, take this services team, do an implementation for Jonathan. The services team is going to get on the phone. They're going to like, hey, why are you buying this? What do you want to solve? What do you want me to set up for you? And then after they finish, they're going to hand it over to like a CS team. And whenever I have problems, I'm going to call into a service support team who's going to ask me the exact same questions every single time. Like, I think we'd all agree that's like a stupid way of doing things, but it's the way that every company does it.
Hmm.
And so when you go out and you're like, one of the ways that we could like do a better job of retaining our customers is by creating a better customer journey. Eliminate some of those handoffs, maybe make them a little bit smoother so people have to keep repeating themselves over and over again. Like, it's obvious. And so when you get down to like the core issue of why those, like, you have this terrible experience, it's because you have a bunch of different data silos where information lives. The marketing system isn't the same as your sales system. Your sales is like, living in Salesforce. And then your CS team lives in Gainsight, and your support system is in Zendesk. And for some reason, despite the fact that we have like customer data platforms and all this like Snowflake and a bunch of other things that are supposed to help us with that, it never really works. So that's why the shitty experience exists. Now, the way that you solve it is, of course, like we've all been thinking about the same thing for a long time. What if we brought all that data together? The problem is you had a whole bunch of different endpoints that you had to use in order to engage with those customers, powered by different systems who may not have access to the same things, who might have had different people that were like driving that. Now, in the world of today, we can actually say we could aggregate all that disparate data sources, the online, offline data that's required in order to deliver a great experience, pull that together. We have a singular model that's driving all the interactions across those different customer experiences. With infinite information about that customer, you can create this amazing personalized experience that would allow them to do everything. I think like that's the problem. And that's what in my mind is what the solution looks like.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode. Help us visualize that. So you walked us through that, kind of status quo experience buying SaaS. Like, what would it look like, when you're falling asleep at night? What's that like dream customer experience look like that you're dreaming about?
You know what I would love to have? I would want it to feel like I had a personal assistant that worked at that company that could do whatever I needed them to do. And so if it was like, hey, I want you to send an email to all of my customers telling them about this amazing product that I'm releasing next week, should be able to do that. If I need to add more seats to my subscription, it should be able to do that. And it's as simple as being able to send a message to, someone named Mark. And it could be an SMS, it could be a Slack message, it might be in product. It would be wherever it is that I want to engage. I think that's what the experience of the future is going to look like, where I don't have to engage with a whole bunch of different people, but Mark is someone who has infinite capabilities and can take action on all of the things that I'm looking for it to do, depending on, what we're talking about.
When it comes to, bringing that level of change to an organization, I would imagine there's like entire departments that sound like they would be, I don't want to say eliminated, but reworked, maybe a better way to frame that. How do you convince an organization to, bring that type of change into their company?
I think most companies right now, and because of macro conditions and a lot of other reasons, are continuing to try to find ways to improve the customer experience so that they can retain their customers at a higher rate and they can help them get more value out of it. When you look at like the tech scene, there's a massive amount of layoffs that have happened and that have occurred over the past couple of years. And so people are being pressured into how do we do more with less people?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really about like, us understanding what are the objectives that your customers are trying to achieve? And then how do we help you do that? When you had to completely restructure the way that you interacted with customers and you had to, rip out all of your existing systems and you had to implement something and you had to retrain all your people, that'd be really hard to do and it would take a really long time. One of the beauties of what we're able to accomplish today is that you can look at the systems that exist and you can look at the way that you're storing data and the way that you're engaging with your customers now. And you can actually simplify and improve that without having to make any of those changes. So I think when you think about the systems that exist today, what they do is they store information and they think of like supports, ticketing systems. The reason why they exist is because you have data that lives all over the place. You have knowledge that different people have. There's languages that different people speak. And so you're able to transfer those appropriate tickets to the right people. In a world where you're democratizing data across all of your AI agents, you no longer need those types of things. And so, you have this intelligent system that lives on top of your existing capabilities and allows you to do a much better job of engaging with your customers.
When it comes to that market category, then, is it customer experience? Like, is that the category? Is that the line item? Or is this a different line item that's, part of the customer experience stack?
What we're talking about today is something that doesn't exist. So right now, if I were to say, hey, I can create AI agents that can solve your customer support inquiries with a high degree of accuracy, like that doesn't sound like a new category. If I could say, hey, I can answer your questions with a high degree of accuracy, but I can pull all of your information into the interactions, every piece of information about every customer that exists into it, sounds a lot more like customer experience. And you actually unlock a lot more capabilities for that AI agent to be able to do things like upsell, cross sell. And then if you could add on another thing of being able to take actions on your behalf, you're like, what is this category? I don't recognize it anymore. And so I think like that's the progression. And so when you think about being able to take on like complex actions, like that feels like it's something different. It feels like it's a lot more analogous to AGI, which I think is something that we're all excited about. We're all like, it kind of exists in the back of our minds and we think it's a little ways off. But I think that's what we're trying to build, the capabilities for us to be able to help people do a better job of utilizing their time, doing things that they're really good at, not kind of going and clicking through UX interfaces.
How far away is AGI? I feel like on Twitter, I see different things thrown around. I know there's a lot of different definitions, even I think, of like what it actually means. Like, how do you think about, I guess, both of those, like the definition and like when it'll be reached? And like, will that be a point? Like, is it a time where we're going to say, like, oh, okay, AGI is here? How do you think about that? Sorry, packing with like three questions there in one.
No. I think it's a really great question. And I think, there's like general AGI, which is like some people might think of like that's a sentient being. The way that I'm thinking about it is I want to focus on like the business aspect. And so, I think an example that I really like is, I've come from a world where I worked with a bunch of folks on the marketing side. And so if like I went out and I bought a marketing system, I could say, give me 100 leads next month. And you think of like the level of complexity required in order to do that. In order to like obtain 100 leads, you have to understand what are the channels you should focus on, who are the like targets, how much are you going to spend? Like there's a whole bunch of like analysis that needs to be done and thought process that have to be worked through and reasoning that has to occur in order to do that. And I think that's like something that I would call business AGI, where you can take on complex business tasks. And so it's something I think that's really interesting and something that I think is probably a few years away. It's closer than we think it is.
What about the marketing approach? So let's unpack the marketing strategy a little bit. I'm guessing there's maybe some inspiration from the HubSpot days, but I don't want to plant that too much there. Like, what is the marketing strategy?
The marketing strategy for Maven, Brett,
Mhm.
I think it's something that's still evolving. From our perspective, we want to focus on helping customers and we want them to help them deliver a better experience. And so, what are the best ways for us to advertise that? It's through the eyes of our customers. I think one of the companies that I'm a huge fan of is Apple. And when you think about the Apple ads that you've seen, you look at them and you say, hey, like, this is a phone, right? And someone was to say that stand in front of you and wave a phone around, you'd be like, it looks a lot like the Google Pixel and the Samsung Galaxy, whatever. They all look the same to me. But if you were able to take that phone and show me what I could do with it, it becomes really powerful. You can take great pictures of your kids as they're crawling, as they're starting to walk, as they're doing all these things. And so the memories that you're going to relive through that phone is what you're selling. Nike does a great example of doing the same thing, right? Of like, hey, listen, you can be more fit, you can be a champion, you can be all these things. Otherwise, you're just selling shoes and everyone sells shoes. So I think, from our perspective, the value in what we're creating, the value in what we're producing is actually best seen through the lens of our customers and what they're doing. And so we're trying to find innovative ways to talk more about our customers and what they're experiencing and how we're helping them.
My wife always makes fun of me, says it's annoying, but I don't think so. But whenever I'm driving, I'm just constantly talking about billboards. Like it's the marketer inside me. I'm like, oh, that's a good billboard. Look at that stupid billboard. Why are so many lawyers? Whenever it comes to those Apple billboards, I always have to like give them a shout out because it's like beautiful shot and it says, shot with an iPhone. And it's just like such a good way to highlight, what their camera can do without telling you any of like the technology stuff that like you don't care about. You just want to see that beautiful image. And like those always stand out to me and they always get a head nod. And like, I analyze a lot of billboards when I'm driving, so that's
Well, I'll have to talk to you before I launch any billboard campaigns because I agree with you. A bad one is easy to spot. Good ones are harder to find.
The mystery to me still is the lawyers. Like, I don't know if you see those everywhere, but like the personal injury lawyers with billboards everywhere. I'm like, what am I missing here? It's like they just own all of the market and they have these like ridiculous billboards, but seems to be effective. But maybe we can save that for another episode.
So there's like two, and I also do like these cheesy like TV commercials as well. It's that, and then it's like the people who own car dealerships. So like people are definitely looking for me to be in like the car dealership ad. Like no one has any idea who you are. They're not buying the car because of you.
Yeah, 100%.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their US and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the team. So what does the marketing team look like today? I know you said that the marketing strategy that's still, really being developed. What's the marketing team look like?
Yeah. So I think there's a unique approach that we've started with. One is that if we are going to help people to understand what a new category looks like, we need someone on the PR and comms side. And so that's someone that, they're going to be able to help us make sure that customers understand how they can go about achieving some of the things that we're setting out to build. The other thing is that we need to be able to engage with folks. And so, you have PR, you have comms, you have people who are doing, kind of focus on growth experiments. And so, for us, the way that we think about it is that we need to figure out where our customers want to engage with us. And if we're going to kind of restrict them, like, hey, you can only find out about us on LinkedIn, like, I don't feel like we're doing our job as a marketing organization. And so we need to find out where our customers are, where they want to engage, where they want to explore opportunities with Maven. And so we're very kind of focused on doing that. And so we do a bunch of experiments over like a set time frame with a set of metrics that we decide whether they're successful or not. And if they're not successful, we move on. And 80% of things are not successful, 20% are, and those are the ones that we double down on.
What's an example of an experiment that you thought was going to be a hit and it turned out to be in the 80%?
I think there's some events that we've done where we're like, hey, amazing event, like great speaker cast, well attended. And it's like, we didn't get the level of engagement from a post kind of event perspective that we were looking for. We're like, hey, like maybe we should do these events. These are great. It brings everyone together. You feel good about it afterwards. And I think people were like, they're engaging around the topic of AI and what's happening in that area, but less so about like, how do I transform my business? And so that was one where it's like, hey, maybe we didn't do a great job because it was one of our early ones. And so I'm sure we'll revisit it at some point. But yeah, I think like events was one that didn't work out quite as expected.
What about the ICP? Is it the same ICP that you initially started with, or have you seen that evolve? And the reason I want to ask that is like, I imagine there's like endless types of customers you could sell this to, endless markets that you could apply this to. How did you narrow that down, or how have you approached narrowing that down?
Yeah. So the way it's interesting because for us, this is really kind of a horizontal challenge. Everyone has like customer experience issues and they can all be better. And so if you like, okay, if I can sell to anyone, how do I sharpen my focus? And so what we did is we actually said, let's separate people into kind of the different buckets that exist. The first bucket is like people who are early adopters, people who are like, we're excited about the thing. We think we can get a leg up on our competition. We want to move fast. Great. We want to talk to all those people. The second is like people who have a real problem. We were talking earlier about some of the macro event trends that are occurring that are like forcing people to do more with less. Great. You have a problem you need to solve. We want to be knocking on your door. The third one is like, hey, we don't really have a problem and there is no pressure for us. And we want to engage with you. We want to help educate you and move you along in terms of your understanding of technology and how you can deploy it and how you can use it. But I think those are people that you want to like, engage with, on a kind of a nurturing basis. And so like, that's kind of how our view of the world is. And so we want to continue to find more of those folks that we feel are like the early adopters, people who want to take chances, people who want to create a moat around their business.
How do you find early adopters? I feel like that's always the issue. So, like they're not having that in their LinkedIn of like, I'm an early adopter. Like, how do you find those people? I wish they did. It would be easier for anyone selling technology.
Early adopter title. I think you continue to look for signals, and so you might say, hey, listen, people who are GMs of business units are going to care more about revenue retention. So those are the people you should really focus on. There's probably like signals for public companies that you can go after, like, certain companies who made a few mistakes that brought down the internet probably don't want to be better at like supporting their customers, right? I think there's certain signals you can look for in terms of people you're going after. there's whole industries that spend a bunch of time on this. There was a couple of companies that I've worked with in the past that did a good job of doing this, help you to identify those. There's like hiring trends. There's specific job posts that they're putting up. There's, 10K reports. There's kind of a bunch of signals that you can look for when you're trying to find companies like that.
What's like the one signal where you're like, fuck yeah, let's get them? Like, is there a specific signal that you're really looking at?
I wish I could find one like that, Brett. I haven't found it yet, but I'm going to keep looking.
Makes sense. Now, what about go-to-market decisions? I know it's, somewhat early on in the journey so far, but to date, what do you think's been the most important go-to-market decision that you've made?
Well, the one that I wish I had made earlier, and we were taking our time to find the right person, was like bringing in a reps person. We hired one probably a month and a half ago. And I'm like, why didn't I have that person here earlier? I think for most startups, especially if you're like, you're doing founder-led sales to start with, it's like, you'd love to have like, all of your data perfect, and you would love to have it all stored perfectly in HubSpot. You'd love to have all the fields set up, and you like to make sure they're all maintained. And you like go through these forecast calls with yourself, exactly the way you would run a large department. It doesn't happen like that, right? It's a fucking disaster. It's all over the place. And you're like, okay, we can definitely do better here. And so the person that we brought in has been amazing. She has just like kind of helped take us to the next level in terms of identifying where are the opportunities for us to do better? How can we do more? So I think one of the mistakes that I wish I had not made was to bring in that RevOps person earlier.
What's the key to hiring a good RevOps person?
It depends on the stage that you're at. The stage we're at, it was really important for us that that person have experience in large and small companies. So you see what good looks like, but being willing to like jump in and roll up your sleeves because you're like an army of one at this stage. And I don't know if there's a great test for it other than having been through that, like, Series A kind of startup experience and saying, yeah, I know what it looks like and I'm willing to do it again. Not everyone is.
Those are the real freaks.
And you're like, what are you thinking? You see it before? But no, I think it's, our Erin has been amazing. Really glad that we brought her in.
What about fundraising lessons? So as I mentioned there in the intro, 28 million raised to date. What have you learned about fundraising throughout this journey? Because this was your first time fundraising, is that right?
That was our first time fundraising. Yeah. So we raised a 8 million seed, and then we raised a 20 million Series A less than a year. I think, from my perspective going into this, knowing that startups are really fucking hard and there's a high chance of failure, you try to de-risk it as much as possible. And so when you think of a startup, how would you de-risk it, Brett?
Have guaranteed customers lined up?
That's a good one. And probably that's something that we could all learn from. The other way you do it is like, hey, if you know it's really fucking hard, what are the things that are required that you have to do in order to build a great software company? Well, you need to be able to build a great product, and you need to make sure that you need to iterate on that. You're building things that your customers actually give a shit about.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we were putting together the company, I was fortunate enough to have two other people who were also equally excited about this idea, who helped to kind of fill those challenges. And so Sammy Shalabi's our CTO. He's had experience building multiple startups. He, sold a startup to Google, worked there for 12 years, built it to, a billion user scale. So he's done all those things. So I'm like, great, this is amazing. And then my other co-founder, Eugene Mann, he was leading the Applied ML team at Stripe. And he had also done a startup before. So it was like, okay, we're all going to be a little fucking crazy together, but we have experience doing the things that are going to help us kind of de-risk going into this. And so finding the best people that you can in order to be able to build it, who are going to help you in the areas where you don't have as much experience about, I would heavily recommend if you can do that.
Final question for you, since we're almost up on time. Let's zoom out 3 to 5 years into the future. What's the big picture vision look like that you're building?
Business AGI. We are helping people to go from saying, hey, we're buying a bunch of seats, we're buying a bunch of software, to saying we can achieve outcomes by telling it what we're looking for. And that's really what we want. How do we help people to build better customer experiences and better businesses with less effort?
Amazing. All right, man, we're up. This was so awesome. Really enjoyed this conversation. A lot of fun, a lot of swearing. Maybe we'll have to bleep them out. No, this has been a blast, man. Where can we send people if they want to follow along with your journey?
Yeah, feel free to follow along on LinkedIn, or you can hit us up on our website, mavenagi.com.
Amazing. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Appreciate it, Brett. Great chatting with you.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.